We get into our Kickstarter this morning, looking at Uganda's socio-political landscape and where it is scaling so far 6 months down into the year 2023. And we can pretty much say halfway the current term for the 11th Parliament and the 6th term for the President of the Republic of Uganda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Uganda adopted a multi-partisan political system in 2005 after 2 decades of effectively having a one-party rule. Now, the formation of political parties is legally protected and many parties are registered to date. More are being registered. However, when you look at the practice of it, it's quite different. You do have the restrictive registration processes. You do have the candidate eligibility rules that are very, very stringent. You do have the limited media coverage for the other parties. You're looking at the violent harassment of state authorities. You're looking at the paramilitary groups hindering opposition parties' ability to actively participate in the socio-political landscape of their own country. Now, the NRM dominates the political sphere and consistently gets to win the elections, deemed neither free nor fair. And you do have the fact that it's lapsing into half a year for us here in 2023 as a country, and we want to zoom in on the political and want to pay attention to the social as well as the economic development of a country in light of that backbone. Why were these multi-partisan things set up for us in Uganda in the first place? What were the objectives? And analyzing the state of a country through the political, socio-economic development, have we reached the point where we're supposed to be bearing fruit? Or have we reached the point where the garden not being tilled accordingly and favorably, you get to see the seeds dying before they even mature into fruit? I'm joined by Sarah Birete, who's a political analyst, and she's very conversant with the Constitution. Perhaps she'll paint a very, very good picture for us in assessment of that. Now, before she does so, good morning to you, and you're most welcome to Morning at NTV.
Good morning, Priscilla and the viewers. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. The dailies this morning have a very interesting topic that they bring to us. Iron sheets. Museveni to decide minister's fate. Iron sheets. Why DPP cleared PM, Vice President, and the Speaker. We get to see politics fueling the decisions and the leadership of this country, especially in influencing where this country is going. We are supposed to be seeing, you know, the law and order of things being with the different agencies that were constituted to execute those mandates. However, the continuous arm of politics in a country continues to worry us as Ugandans. 6 months down the road, this is not the first of its kind. There are many other incidences. We have seen the political arm coming in and the whole statement becoming a reality yet again, orders from above. What's your assessment so far?
Yeah, well, maybe as a bit of background, when you're assessing the socio-economic landscape of a country, you're looking at the functioning of the political institutions, you're looking at the governance architecture in the country, the human rights record, poverty and inequality levels, international assessment of the country, and rule of law. So as we kick off with the governance of the country and the functioning of the political institutions, we have a situation where the president, or according to our constitution, the back on, you know, big governance decisions rests with the president. When the Karamoja saga, you know, broke out, it stood out for mainly the number of ministers, about 24. Involved in one particular saga of carrying iron sheets for their personal use. Iron sheets meant for vulnerable people in Karamoja, for restoring the former fighters, the Karachuna, and you take these iron sheets for your personal use. After a long process of procurement, supplementary budget approved by cabinet, objectives are clear, parliament, and then you procure and disappear with the items. So when the president, first of all, in a normal democratic country, the implicated ministers should have resigned. So when the resignation fails, then the president should have relieved them of their duties. We have seen previously, for example, the ministers involved in Gavi Fund scandal, the ministers involved in Chogam scandal, the president set them free before they were lined in courts. But this time round, you see ministers taking plea one morning, the next day they are officiating, representing the president, the next day they are representing the country outside Uganda. They've taken plea for criminal charges, although there's a presumption of innocence. But they should have stepped aside as they deal with a trial. So that was a political failure on the part of President Museveni, and he should have acted yesterday. So when the DPP says that the president should take action, the action that he has failed to take for about 6 months, is he going to take it? And what has he been waiting for if he takes it? So I think for me that's the biggest problem with the Karamoja scandal.
Okay, all right, thank you so much, Sarah. We are equally joined by Captain Francis Babo, who is also going to give us his perspective, given that this morning he has 4 lenses. Perhaps he has seen it all, and therefore his wisdom could give us a better picture of the socio-political landscape for us here in Uganda. 6 months down the road, Captain, in your opening remarks, what is the state of Uganda's socio-political and economic development landscape? Are we on track, especially in light of Museveni to decide ministers' fate yet again?
Yeah, well the landscape, is that question is really big. You're talking about management of society. And management of society, that is what politics is anyway, management of society. Management of society has got the politics, it's got the economy, it's got the social side of it. The social side of it is the services that we give to the country. And all that is now being looked after by the security. So you're now talking about several things in one. Now, our political culture, and I think that's where your question comes in. Do we have a good political culture? And this is something that we must now sit down and think very carefully. Political culture, you see, when they give you a job, and we elect you, after we have elected, we give you a job, we give you a title honorable. You are supposed to act honorably. And when we are kind enough, we also call you Excellency. Now, it doesn't mean that you're honorable or excellent. It means you're one of the very few who has just managed to get through. And in the countries like ours, some of them are not even honorable when they are being elected. So we don't have a political culture. A political culture which we are copying. This is where the problem is. Everything we have in Africa, we have copied from somebody else. But they had their own culture in which this political culture developed.
Were designed.
So you are copying somebody else's culture, which you have not yet understood. The sensitivity of certain things you do when you're in leadership. Now, the qualities of a leader. All these things we have to sit down and think very carefully. And you look at the administrative structure of our country. A parliament of 529 people. You look at a cabinet of 80 people. A country, if you look at the United States, you know, a lot of people like to quote the United States, but our country is smaller than most of those states in terms of size and in terms of people. Now, we've gone and copied a democracy we don't understand. We've gone out, we put ourselves in something called multi-party elections, which require certain cultural norms. Now, you find that certain things are done, and we've got to close our eyes. But we're still learning. We're not mature politically. You know, these are the kind of things you keep on hearing. Now, my point here is to put up a good political culture, the leadership has to come out very clearly and very strongly that a person must behave in a certain way. I was talking to a young man, people of your age group, and I said, "Oh, I saw you many years ago." He said, "Yes, sir. I've done a computer. I've got a master's degree. I've got a company of cyber security." I said, "Very fantastic. But you have a lot of people nowadays. Young people have got degrees, masters." He says, "Yes, sir. But the problem is, we don't have character." Now, the question now comes again to answer that question: do we have character as Ugandans when we're in leadership? And I think this is where it becomes extremely important. Now the president has got a buck, like somebody said, the buck stops at the president. He now has to decide whether these people have got character. The DPP has said within the law, you cannot touch them. The question is, now are we at law, or are we at the level of character? Are we at the level of culture norms? Somebody has to be, when you're in that stature, did you really go around with the kind of salary we give you? Because our country is poor, and the salary of these people is very high. Do we really have to sit down and start splitting hair, saying there are certain things you shouldn't do? That should be within you. And this culture that we have to develop, unfortunately, and people should not blame one on the other. It is something that is going to come up. In countries like Britain, when they just point their fingers, you just resign. Yeah. In America, you
before they even point the finger, you by character,
that's right,
pawn it upon you to just step
correct
down.
And so we need to look, but we've got very good culture, by the way. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
our culture, if people did not run away from our culture has got, when they teach us at home, they teach you two words which are very important: thank you and sorry. Now people want to make us believe that they have developed a new culture which is not there. Remember, Professor said something the other day which was very good. The easiest way to become rich is to go into politics. And the politics is the quickest way.
Okay. Speaking of politics, Captain Babu says that we adopted a culture that was not initially ours, and therefore for it to work for us requires a lot more than actually practicing the culture that we adopted. The culture that we're referring to here is the democracy of our country. We did have the one-party rule at one point X, then we adopted a new culture of multi-partisan rule, which has definitely gone through its criticism. In assessment, with your constitutional background and analysis, did we make the right move to move away from one-party rule to the multi-partisan rule? Has it served Uganda any better from the previous times? Sarah?
Well, Uganda has had a multi-party dispensation before the 2025-26 adoption of again going back to multi-party politics. Is multi-party our problem? I don't think so. Multi-party politics or political freedoms have an advantage.
It may not be a problem, but it seems to be the problem of the government.
No, I'm coming, because what is government? You know, political freedoms have an advantage of allowing, you know, broad citizens' participation in their governance. So the essence of multi-party politics is to give everybody a chance to participate in a way they deem fit in their governance. So people might not agree with you or me and what we are saying here, but they also have their own spaces. And those are the political parties. Or we have civic organizations, civic spaces. So when you say that multi-party politics is part of our problem, the problem is the culture of our politics. Because if you say the principle is to have freedoms for everybody, to freely participate in their governance, then why do you? For example, I had, as I was coming here, the largest political party is saying 20 people since elections are still missing to death. So why do you then start arresting people, enacting laws like the Public Order Management Act, enacting, you know, like our Political Parties Act, which curtails fundraising for political parties and later curtails their activities? So when you have these laws that do not facilitate the key principle in the Constitution, you know, people like saying that the Constitution is, you must breathe life into the Constitution. It's a living document, but you must practice it. A Constitution alone cannot empower the people. So when you enact acts of parliament that do not empower the people the way the framers of the Constitution envisaged, then you get a kind of system that we are stuck with today. And it's largely practice. Bad laws at parliamentary level, practiced by our security agencies mainly, that think or presume that anybody who does not support NRM in this country is a criminal, that must be treated terribly, must be beaten. You saw political candidates campaigning in bulletproof, you are shooting at their supporters, yet this is a campaign process. We had a candidate nominated in socks after being dumped at a nomination center by police, the FDC candidate. We had every other opposition candidate arrested, disrupted. Genome Jisha's Muntu's rallies were disrupted 46 times in the last campaigns. So you have this kind of environment. The secularization of politics, the high-handedness is what has created a distortion of multi-party system. Now, whether we adopted the wrong system or not, the Constitution says you can change it. Then if you think it is wrong for you, change it. Yeah.
That's where I was going with, Captain. With your direct engagement in active politics, do you feel that the multi-party politics has served any purpose to the development of our country?
Well, first of all, it has put us in confusion. That's one thing, and there's a conflict between different groups. I want us to be very careful. In our academic training, our elites, they study all these things, and they sound very good. Theoretically, they are very good. But we always come up to one problem. Have we, because our society now has got two levels, the elite, the educated, and the majority who are not that very well educated. Our system of governance before the white man came here was strictly kingdoms and chiefdoms. Our people, if you see them today, they strive to go to their kingdoms.
They pay more allegiance
to the kingdoms.
Yeah.
Now, it shows that there is something that is missing. Now, when the British were here for 70 years, they never took us through that system, which their culture, to teach us how to do multi-parties. They started in the 1950s. And when they started, we came up with our parties, they went into confusion. In fact, they're the ones who created more problems for our parties. Now, the thing that killed this country was the beginning, at that beginning there, in terms of multi-party. Governor Cohen came up and said, we want an East African Federation. Parts of Uganda said, no, we don't need it. That, by the way, is the precursor of our problems, and the precursor of playing around with the political parties and dividing them and so on and so forth. Now, when you go back and look at it, the average man, he thinks that being in a political party is going for combatant. He does not get that sportsmanship spirit. That parties is something you're supposed to learn and understand. Well, we've had different elections in this country. We've had elections initially with multi-parties in 1962. A one-party system never had any elections when Obote brought it. In 1970, they removed the 771, they removed the government. We had a military power. And suddenly in 1980, we had elections again, 881. Now, when these people were elected, they crossed the floor again. What had happened in 1964? We now created, parties do not stick to what they are supposed to be. So, then a group came and started. They said, look, we're talking like us. What you're doing is not good enough. You get out. So he got out, and the group comes in. Within 4 years, we're going to make a constitution, and we're going to get out of government. And they realized it was not a very easy task. And that was a very big task. We made a constitution. Now, the people who make law, and my sister here is a doctor, he's a lawyer. To make a law, there must be a nuisance of some sort in the society. It's that nuisance which determines what law you make. Now, our elite tell us there was a nuisance for something, and they made laws. Some laws might not be good for us, but we can change them, like she said. So, what I'm trying to explain here is, whilst we have adopted this thing, and it's got all these beautiful things when you are talking, they come out very nicely, we have failed to practice it. Whether it is a government party, whether it is a by the way, all these parties have a problem, and all of them have come up from that big party.
You say that you call it failure to practice them.
Yes.
I would say perhaps it's whatever is being practiced by the government against multi-partisan dispensation is in favor of the government, isn't it? Because if they have the power to actually change the constitution in regard of the nuisance that you talk about, this nuisance that has been here since 2005, many years down the road, you surely have enough evidence to assess, evaluate, and make a more informed decision that you can then touch the constitution and be able to amend accordingly to the nuisance so that you can be able to create a solution. So why are they not using that avenue, Sarah, in regards to making sure that this nuisance in society is dealt with? Because at the end of the day, they are spending the country's resources on dealing with this nuisance when they have the power by the rule of law.
Like you put it, you know, the frustration of opposition parties in this country is deliberate by the regime. It's deliberate. When you see the acts, the draconian acts of security agencies, they are meant to favor one party, the NRM. And who is the commander-in-chief of NRM? And why does police, army act like that in elections, in abuse of the constitution, in abuse of the laws, and they are not reprimanded, and instead they are promoted, and who promotes them? So this is a deliberate political act by President Museveni to keep in power. That's why he frustrates political parties. We could have the socio-economic challenges that Captain Babu is talking about, dealing with the grassroots people. But I have dealt with grassroots people, and at times we think they don't understand, but they do. They do understand. So if people, you can't say everybody belongs to NRM, like we had the movement system. But people were saying we don't belong even when it was there by law. We had the likes of James Rwanyarare, Cecilio Gwara, and others who said we cannot belong and you are not going to conscript us by law. Because freedom of association, expression, and assembly entitles them to belong where they are free. So you are not going to bundle people. Unless you are saying, let's go back to kingdoms, or let's go back to federal arrangements. But otherwise, people are free to belong. Even when you put a law, they would say, we don't want. Captain Babu was in CA. We had a walkout of people who were against the infamous Article 269, curtailing activities of political parties to headquarters. What debate transpired? And democracy demands that even the minority must have a say. So even the constitution had the walkout of the minority.
Well, the minority must have a say here. The voice of every Ugandan should be considered at the end of the day. So to whom is this nuisance serving? Is it serving the government or is it serving the Ugandans? A question that we shall be returning to with the answers right after this break. Still on our Kickstarter on this Monday morning, the 26th of June, looking at the political, social, economic landscape of Uganda in regards to development. The decisions that were made many years ago, have they actually yielded fruit, or is it a dead garden still? And so far, from my pundits, who's Dr. Sarah Birete and Captain Francis Babu, they're saying it's pretty much a dead end for us. Question is, how do we pick up the pieces? But when we went into the break, the question that I had for them was, who is actually benefiting from this chaos? Because they seem to agree that this chaos and this nonsense is actually being allowed to serve a certain purpose. What's that purpose? What is that particular purpose? And who is gaining out of the purpose? For example, the Russia-Ukraine war. It could have ended many, many months ago, but someone stands to benefit. So, Sarah, who stands to benefit from this multi-party madness that we are seeing in the country, where we do have the partisan dispensation by law allowed, but by practice and reality, it's being curtailed, it's being handcuffed, it's being imprisoned?
Well, in Uganda today, there are two groups of people who enjoy freedom of association, assembly, and expression without any hindrance. Supporters of NRM party and religious freedoms exist. If you don't support the NRM party, it's a tall order to freely associate, to freely access the people. You see activities of political parties disrupted every now and then, even when there are no elections. Now political parties, either you go as if you're attending a football pitch to have a conversation with citizens. So maybe we need to ask ourselves, do we need to continue with this pretense or not? And of course the beneficiary is the ruling party. You cannot have, like I said, the framers of the Constitution, and we are glad to have one of them here. They did not make a mistake by making a president a commander-in-chief of security forces so that he takes responsibility for the men in uniform. But when you see their conduct, and he keeps quiet, year in, year out, for 20 years consecutively, we have an increased curve of political violence in this country. He does not even talk about it in State of Nation address. During elections, the madness that happens by the security forces that he commands, he does not talk about it. The Supreme Court, in the Amama Mbaba's decision, stepped a bit far to, curb the madness by saying we should have entrenched, punishment mechanism for security forces and government officials that participate in elections and cause chaos. But who is the beneficiary? The president. The Attorney General, in implementing the decisions of the Supreme Court, left out that one recommendation. And maybe the professors who went to court to file for contempt of the Attorney General, they should go back, because one recommendation was never implemented. Mm-hmm. And that is the recommendation on security forces and the chaos they cause during elections. Okay.
Captain Francis Babu, we look at political actors, and time memorial, we seem to have a recurrency of the same political actors, 1960, 1980, 1995 to present day. Maybe those do have an influence in how the multi-party Zan dispensation is not yielding fruit for us in Uganda.
First and foremost, we are human beings. Human beings have got excesses. Human beings have got certain traits. If you look at people, their behavior for years, starting from the 1960s, 1980s, and now, there are people who have been in that political game for some time. Their methods of work have not changed. And I want us to be very fair, because I keep hearing NRM all the time. These are people. It's not something which is different. They are human beings. They are Ugandans. And some of them came from all those old parties, by the way. Some came from UPC, came from DP, and they joined. There's even the other one, what was it called, Liberal Party? They all came and joined together.
And you continue to add them. You've added UPC and DP.
Now, the reason why I've brought this thing up is that we are the same people. And people tend to give them labels. Let's not give labels. Let's have natural justice. Mm-hmm. When you see people who are now talking in the different parties, some of them were parties, we had something called Young Parliamentarians Association, YPA. We had PAFO. We had Reform Agenda. These are all people who came through that line of saying we are young. Mm. Therefore we must be. Now, the same young thing is still continuing. It goes into the other new parties we have. Now, that seems to be the ideology, young people. Now, when you go from there, and sometimes I want to ask my sister here and a few other people, so how is the behavior of the people in those parties? Because we seem to, let's put the big party on the side. What is the behavior of the other people? When you hear of saying, some of them feel that to change this, to change the regime change, you must have violence. Then you find somebody saying, you get somebody getting a policewoman and using a hammer on her head. Then you move and you find somebody burning a police station. Then you move, somebody's beating a judge. Now, these kind of things you can't, these are the people, it's not the party. I'm trying to say, there are people within these parties who have got bad manners. And this is where I told you that we have a bad political culture. Now, this is what we need to cure. We don't cure only the one side. We cure everybody in the playing field. When you are playing football, like some of us like football, both teams have to behave in a certain way, and there are laws we have put there. The question is, if one team behave badly, and Madame quoted somebody without shoes, that one was a very big propaganda. We know how it was done. But the whole point is, I'm going to tell you.
Using police?
that one, somebody removed their shoes, they even removed their socks, they returned the shoes to them, removed it, they returned it, they refused it.
So you seem to have different evidence.
Yes, right.
What
This was a propaganda thing.
Public.
Now, the other one where somebody, when they went for that registration, they were told after registering, please, you go back using this route. Somebody said, no, I'm not going to use that route. So, well, if you have agreed on something, you follow it. But putting that thing aside, those are small things. The real thing, how can we get the ruling party and all those other parties to sit down and dialogue? People said iPod was not good.
Okay.
Fine. If iPod is not good, what else can we use?
You speak of dialogue. Sarah, why must there be dialogue? Why should the likes of Captain Babu ask for dialogue or seek dialogue as the solution when by rule, by constitution, that was already cleared? Everyone knows the objectives, their mandate, and how it ought to be dispensed. That already exists, and if everyone respects their duties to that part of the constitution, we shouldn't be in this place. We shouldn't be in this situation in the first place.
True, but I wanted to respond a bit on the conduct of the opposition. You know, Martin Luther King said that the methods of the oppressed are determined by the oppressor. So when you're coming up against a repressive regime, how do you conduct yourself? Yes, it's true that we should have a level playing field. I agree that we should have rules that apply to everybody. But the NRM operates above the rules, even basic rules. So when the oppressed now come in with their own survival mechanisms, yes, it is wrong. But we need to first deal with the oppressor who is using state machinery to oppress the other people. The oppressed have no state machinery, they have no access. So when they are trying, maybe it's self-defense.
After all, that's how they also came into power. They contested what should have been the minimum basics of attaining political freedom in this country. And because they were not happy with it, they aggrieved themselves and took it to the wall to be able to do something different.
Yes, and it goes back to the culture. What is the culture in our governance? What is the consensus? And going back to your question of dialogue, you know, many people have been saying that the 1995 consensus that delivered, you know, the current constitution no longer holds. First of all, the constitution has been mutated by several amendments that are aimed at benefiting an individual. Removal of term limits, removal of age limit, failure of peaceful political handover of power. Yet when you go back to the objective, or the preamble of the constitution, that was the conversation of the people. That was the mood of the country. People said we are tired of leaders who must go by the bar of the gun. Can we have a framework for political handover of power, peaceful? But it has collapsed through the mutation of the constitution. So yes, the consensus of the 1995 constitution no longer holds in the country. So, but can we have dialogue? The problem is that for President Museveni, dialogue means agreeing with him and joining him. He does not understand the true essence of dialogue. So do we have conditions existing to enable the true meaning of dialogue in this country? Okay. I do not think so. Maybe we need the higher level facilitators.
Speaking of dialogue, opposition actually recently came together and had dialogue on electoral reforms. But however, they were denied, you know, being put on the floor of parliament by the opposition members. A debate that has actually raised a lot of dust. Captain, in regards to the role of the opposition, I think by law it's supposed to be regarded as the alternative government, which is supposed to be giving alternative solutions to some of the things that are of contention here and there in public democracy and governance. What does this translate to for the strength of opposition or weakness thereof?
Before you go to the floor of parliament, let me assure you, all over the world, you should have a quiet dialogue. In fact, this is where I told you that we copy cultures we don't understand. The Western world, which we like to copy all the time, before they come to that floor of parliament, they have dialogued. They talk. Now, they respect each other. Are you with me? Now, when they come to the floor of parliament, they have virtually decided what they want to do. And I'll give you an example. You remember when Al Gore and Bush had a problem of the elections? You remember that time? They dialogued, and actually Bush, they had cheated in Florida. Are you with me? Now, somehow they have got these heritage common houses where they go and sit down and they talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when they have finished talking, the leaders, the old leaders who are there, who are not part of the election, say, listen, last time you were here for 10 years, let these people go for another 10 years also. So when they came to the Supreme Court, the judge had already got the answer and said, okay, there is a little bit of problem, there's no problem. What we'll do with Al Gore, we'll give him to go and do environment and all that, and we'll get the government to go. And Mr. Bush, you can go back and have election. And he became the president of the United States. Now, we need to learn that, let me tell you, fighting, insulting each other, propaganda, all these things will not help. The only thing that can help is that we develop a culture of talking to each other. Are you with me? Whether you like it or not, even this Ukraine war you are talking about, I saw Zelensky showing himself off. He thinks he's now Netanyahu. Netanyahu is in Israel. He is very negative. This guy also has become negative. The way he talked to African president really annoyed me. Putin is not any better. So what our people are saying, why don't you people sit down and have, because it's affecting us in the whole of Africa. Now, the whole point is very simple. We need to find a way. Whether the leader who everybody talks about is not in favor of this, we've got to try and cajole him and convince him time has come for us to try and talk. And sir, this is what we want. It's not against you. You can even stay in power, but we want you to give us a little bit more space.
Okay. We have seen that nature of dialogue. But
if I may ask,
in conclusion, because our time is fast spent, but in conclusion, that dialogue, how does it become a reality for us, Uganda? Because at the end of the day, we ought to benefit.
Before I finish, have you seen how they talk in Parliament? All of them work together?
In the Ugandan Parliament?
Yeah, majority. They work together most of the time. If you can put them in a place and they can talk, that can bring up dialogue.
Can we put them in a place so that they can have this dialogue?
The Interreligious Council has tried and trying to bring up a bottom-up approach for dialogue in this country. It ended with the failure to sign a communique in the State House. When they went for communique signing, the process ended in a photo moment. They just took a picture, and you cannot hear of dialogue anymore. There is no signed document. There is no way forward. After wasting a 2-year process of deep thinking and consultations. So are we ready for dialogue as a country? I don't think so. Okay. But will I have time to conclude?
Yes, please. Now is the time for you to conclude.
So I wanted to conclude briefly that when you look at the elements of the socio-economic landscape, we have increasing inequalities in this country. Our Gini coefficient element is now at 45.6. You know, inequality, when you're at 100%, it's total inequality. When you're at 0, you have equality in the country. We are halfway the curve, and it's very dangerous. So we need to work to minimize these growing inequalities in this country. Okay.
With the present political actors not going away anytime soon, how do we walk to the promised land?
Listen, I'm very positive. I think this country can change. And I want to say this. Process of bringing about peace is not a short affair. And a lot of young people are impatient. I understand there's a few problems which are not right, which are wrong. But we've got to find solution to those problems, whether we want it or we don't, for the sake of our posterity. We've got to get the country working, whether we like it or not. Now, you can sit there and pretend that you don't want it to work, but eventually it will go with you. When there's a change, the change will change you. So we would like to continue to talk to our people, those ones who are all negative, and say, listen, we must talk. Yeah, and I would like to thank you very much, because this is a very important topic. You need more time next time,
yes,
so that we can talk about it. But I can't leave this place without saying the thing that happened in Kasese was very unfortunate. And I don't want the reasons people are giving. I want us to find what happened and find a solution to it. What we need to do, by the way, that's why we go to school. We have challenges. We should find solutions. All right.